We're of course going to get Paul McGann in on this, and of course the only way to get Paul McGann stuff is through Big Finish Audio, a very important one. This is the very first Paul McGann story that Big Finish ever did, called Storm Warning, and this was a kind of a big deal because when they started in '99, they only had Doctors 5 through 7, and about 2 years later they got McGann, and that was a big get because he only got the movie. And from what I've seen of them, of what they do later, because this is the first one I did. The earliest one I would go to after that would be Neverland, and then Zagreus and all that. All the other stuff happens much after that, after Charlie's gone and all that. The character Charlie, who was in Zagreus, which I reviewed, and of course this is her debut as well. Up front, this is the first Paul McGann one this wasn't the first one I listened to. I listened to Zagreus. No, I listened to the first 3 Eighth Doctor adventure ones, the first 2, both parts of Bullet of Daleks and horror glam rock, and those are done. The way they're formatted to be about 50 minutes, so close to the length of the modern show. And then Zagreus is basically 3 70-minute episodes. Neverland, which takes place before Zagreus, was 2 70-minute episodes. And then I have a few of the Eighth Doctor adventures from the 4th season, where they're 2 25-minute episodes, which I honestly don't see the point in doing that, but whatever. Changing the format like that in the same series. So this is the first time I'd listened to a Paul McGann story as 4 episodes in audio. And it wasn't anything, it wasn't hard to get used to. It wasn't weird to hear this doctor do that. But it was still, it was worth noting. The story is somewhat simple. It has a lot of this it starts out like a lot of stories like these do. The doctor shows up, making a big point of the fact that he needs a new companion because he's been on his own for who knows how long. Because we don't know if this is after the movie or if comics and books play at this point we don't know if comics play a role or not. Eventually Big Finish would reference other stuff like comics and books and all that, so it's definitely not the case now, but back then, who knows. He lands inside the R-101 airship in 1930. And while this is happening, we meet Charlie, who's posing as a crewman, who eventually gets found out by the rest of the crew. And it basically becomes this kind of interesting adventure. They eventually find that the ship is holding a being called the Engineer Prime, who is basically the head engineer of this race called the Triskelion. The Triskelion, whose ship crashed just a year before and was covered by the British military. And basically after that, it becomes oh no, this alien force on this ship is becoming dangerous, and boom, the threat. It's very simple, but honestly, I'm okay with that. I mean, Smith and Jones was was one of my very first Doctor Who stories in general, the premiere series 3, and that's basically the same thing. Doctor shows up, aliens happen, bad stuff happens. So it's not an overly complicated story, but it was still a lot of fun. The cast was pretty good. McGann, and at this point it would have been 5 years since he had a chance to, do anything with the role, and I like him here. He's very, very kind of very light, very kind, very nice, making jokes to himself. He really likes to play up the fact that, he likes to play up the fact that he's met a lot of people. He references so many historical figures. Even sets up the whole Mary Shelley joke, which they eventually would pay off in Company of Friends, and that would spin off into a trilogy of stories in the main range. So I like to see that. This Doctor in particular, at least from what I've seen, likes to name drop a lot. Is very proud of the fact that he travels through history. And then Charlie herself is very young, adventurous, imaginative, gets along great with McGann. I want to get even more with her because I've only seen her in so many stories. I really like her from the three I've seen, but if I listen to more, I hope I really get to like her. Plus, she's getting her own spin-off sometime in the future. When, I have no idea. Neither does the company. And the rest of the supporting cast, they're not terrible. They're all good, but another problem is none of them are memorable. None of them are really that memorable. They just kind of play stock roles of we work on this ship, and the guy, designated bad guys can act like designated bad guys. There's nothing too new or interesting about them, but the actors are just being told what they're supposed to do, and I can't fault them on that. They're doing their job well, but I mentioned this in Sunmakers. The supporting cast in this show, for every story, you really need to get them. You really need to get their attention because we're only going to see them for the story most likely, and we need to make sure. You do want to make them memorable, so it's kind of a shame. But I like this one. It's not great. It's an above average story, but again, it's not fantastic. See McGann and India Fisher, who plays Charlie. They're great. Also, there's a scene where the Doctor has to fight off time-traveling pterodactyls in the time vortex. That seems cool. That part was great, but again, a lot of that has to do with McGann and none of the supporting characters. That's what's kind of upset me. And this is, let me remind you, I've listened to this a few times now. The supporting cast never really grew on me. Has yet to grow on me upon this third re-listening I've given it. So, it's a very good place to start because A, it's the first one, and B, McGann's great. But, so if you just want one to start with this Doctor, I'd definitely go with this one. If I had to choose, I'd say go with Blood of the Daleks. I think that story's a lot more exciting and a lot more creative, and has a lot of the supporting cast is far more interesting and memorable from there. But as a simple starting point, definitely consider this when you're trying stuff out.